The rain hits the window like 1,000 tiny knives, each droplet carving a rhythm that sets my nerves on edge. Shadows crawl along the walls, twisting in shapes that shouldn't exist, yet somehow do. I sit here, alone, listening to the storm, feeling the chill seep into my bones. And I can't shake the memory of what I've seen, what I've lived through. Most people dismiss it as fantasy, whispers in the dark, nothing more than stories to scare children. But I know better. I've been close enough to touch it, close enough to hear it breathe. And tonight, I'm telling you everything. If you think you're safe tonight, think again. Outside, the rain masks the sound of things moving where they shouldn't. Beneath the mundane hum of life, cars passing, neighbors tucked in their beds. There are things waiting, watching. I felt their eyes on me more times than I can count. And the worst part is knowing they don't need permission to enter. They're patient, they're clever, they're already closer than you realize. The first story I'm about to tell comes from someone I barely know, a friend of a friend. But it haunts me more than I can admit. He never recovered, not fully. Some nights, I wonder if he truly ever left the place he described, or if he brought something back with him. The rain that night was relentless, much like it is now, and I can still hear the faint, mocking whisper that followed him home. It's that whisper, the one no one else hears, that can make you question everything you thought you knew about safety, about reality. By the end of tonight, after all 10 stories, you might start noticing things you didn't before. Shadows that linger too long, sounds that have no explanation. And maybe, just maybe, one of these stories will reach out to you personally. But first, the story of my friend's friend and the night he vanished into something no one dares name. Story 1. Life after death. Encounter. It started with small things. Shadows that seemed just a fraction too long. Whispers that vanished the moment I turned my head. I had told myself it was grief, that my mind was playing tricks after losing her. My sister had died 6 months earlier, sudden and cruel, leaving an emptiness I could barely name. I'd learned to live around it, filling my days with work and noise, convincing myself the world was still ordinary. Until that night, I was alone in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when I heard it, a soft, familiar laugh, the one she used to make when she caught me off guard. My heart froze. "Emma?" I whispered, half hoping, half terrified. Silence answered. But then, from the corner of the room, a shape flickered. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just a shadow. But the air grew heavy, charged, and I could smell her perfume, that mix of jasmine and something sweet I'd never forget. I can't stay," she said, her voice thin, distant, but unmistakable. My knees nearly buckled. "Emma, you're gone." My words trembled. "No, not gone. Just waiting," she whispered, reaching for me, and the room went cold, ice crawling under my skin. The lights flickered, shadows twisting unnaturally around her form. Her eyes, my sister's eyes, were hollow yet pleading, and I knew, in some way I cannot explain, that she had a message I was meant to hear. I reached out, and my fingers passed through her as if she were made of smoke. Panic clawed at me. "Why? What do you want?" I shouted, my voice shaking. She tilted her head just for a moment, and the faintest smile crossed her lips. Sad, knowing. Then she was gone. The room was silent, except for the rain hammering against the window and the lingering scent of jasmine. I still don't know why she came back, or what she wanted from me. Since that night, I noticed signs, fragments of her presence in ordinary moments. A door creaking, a light turning on, a shadow that doesn't belong. Some nights, I feel like she's watching, waiting for me to understand. And that wasn't the only encounter that night. Something else, darker, lingered just beyond my perception. Something that, unlike her, didn't come to comfort, but to warn. Story 2. Doppelganger in the Dark. It started innocently enough. I was walking home late, the city slick and wet from the evening rain, my reflection catching in puddles and shop windows. I joked to myself, well, at least I look good tonight, shaking off the chill that crawled up my spine. I didn't notice the subtle shift at first. The feeling that someone was mirroring my steps just behind me. Silent, patient, I turned a corner and froze. There, across the street, under the flickering street lamp, was me. Every detail, the jacket, the hair, even the way I tilted my head, was identical. My first instinct was laughter, nervous and sharp. Okay, very funny, I muttered aloud, scanning for a prankster. But the street was empty, not a soul in sight. The doppelganger raised a hand, slow, deliberate. I mirrored it automatically, a reflex that sent a jolt of horror through me. Its smile wasn't mine, it was sharper, cruel, almost mocking. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light. A reflection stretched oddly. But as I turned another corner, it appeared again, always just a few feet away, never blinking, never hesitating. What? What are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The double tilted its head, the corners of its mouth twitching as if amused by a private joke I wasn't in on. My hands shook, laughter breaking through, brittle and uneven. "Really, this is hilarious, guys. Who set this up?" But the laughter died when it raised its other hand and pointed toward me. Not menacing exactly, but warning, precise. I ran. Every street corner, every shadow seemed to shift, echoing my movement. I caught glimpses of it in reflections. Mirroring me, mocking me, predicting my steps. By the time I reached my apartment, soaked and breathless, I thought it had disappeared. But when I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, it wasn't alone. My reflection smiled at me differently than I had. A cold, knowing smile that sent a wave of nausea through me. I've never been the same. I can't shake the feeling that somewhere my doppelganger waits, a harbinger of something I cannot yet name. What would you do if you saw yourself doing something you didn't? And this wasn't an isolated incident. The night didn't end with just me and that shadow of myself. It was part of a larger, unexplainable pattern, one that seems to creep into lives, to whisper warnings we're not always ready to hear. Story 3. Sleep paralysis with a visitor. It always starts the same way. My body sags into the mattress, muscles locking in a vice I cannot escape. Eyes open, yet trapped. Breath shallow, heart hammering. And then I see it. Always in the corner of my room, just beyond reach. A shape made of shadows, solid yet unreal. Some nights, it feels like it knows your deepest fears. Every secret buried where no one else could don't ever find it. The first time, I thought it was a dream. A cruel trick my mind played on me after a long day. But the pattern became impossible to ignore. Weeks turned into months. And every night, like clockwork, the paralysis returned. The pressure on my chest, like someone pressing their full weight on me, grew heavier with each episode. I tried to scream, mouth opening, sound caught somewhere in my throat. But only a strangled whisper escaped. It doesn't speak, not in words. It doesn't need to. I feel its intentions. A tilt of its head. A slow glide closer to the bed. A finger pointing toward me without moving. The first time, it lingered. And I understood, somehow, that it wanted me to see something. To know something I could not yet comprehend. By the third episode, I began noticing the subtle differences in my room. Objects slightly moved. Shadows stretched farther than the angle of the moon should allow. I kept asking myself if I was losing my mind. The terror doesn't lessen with familiarity. It grows like a wound that refuses to heal. The nights bleed together. I dread closing my eyes. The figure waits patiently, hovering, watching. Its silent gaze piercing into the marrow of my bones. Some nights, I swear it whispers my name. Though my ears hear only the hum of the fan. I started sleeping in the living room. Lights on, doors locked. But even then, I couldn't escape. It was patient, waiting. Some nights, I think it is learning. Watching patterns, feeding on my fear, understanding my weakness. I don't know what it wants or why it chooses me, but I know one thing. When it visits, nothing else exists. Only the weight, the darkness, and the unshakable knowledge that I am not alone. And yet, sleep isn't the only place danger waits. The world outside my room, the waking hours, are no sanctuary either. Something else is stirring, something that doesn't need dreams to reach you. Story 4. Haunted Object. I found it at a thrift store, tucked between dusty books and broken lamps. A small ornate mirror with an intricate frame that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. At first, I thought it was beautiful, a relic worth saving. Most people would have tossed it aside, unaware of the eyes that watched or the whispers it carried. But I took it home, naive, unaware that some things don't just sit on a shelf. they follow. The first nights were subtle. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the reflection that didn't match my own. A tilt of the head, a shadow crossing the glass when no one was near. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was my imagination. "It's just an old mirror," I muttered. But even as I said it, the unease curling in my stomach refused to leave. Then the whispers began. At first, faint, like wind brushing against the glass. I thought I heard my name, and the hair on my arm stood on end. I asked my roommate if she heard anything. She didn't. Friends noticed me growing tense, distracted, but I brushed it off, embarrassed. How do you explain a mirror that seems alive? It wasn't long before the mirror started to manipulate reality. Objects shifted overnight. Photos I had hung straight were askew. My reflection began to twist in ways I couldn't replicate. Smiles too wide, eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. I tried to leave it, pack it away. But waking up each morning, it was always in the same place, perfectly positioned, as if it had returned on its own. The paranoia crept in, gnawing at my every thought. I couldn't concentrate. I would wake in the middle of the night, convinced I'd seen someone behind me in the mirror, only to find the room empty. But the sense of being observed never left. Most people throw it away, I told myself. But what if it follows you? What if some objects hold more than memory, more than dust, and they carry with them the hunger for attention, for fear? Eventually, I began noticing similar items everywhere. Mirrors, dolls, trinkets, quietly observing from second-hand shelves, waiting for someone careless enough to bring them home. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone in my experience. There are multiple cursed items out there, each with a story, each with a whisper, and sometimes these objects find you, not the other way around. I only hope you've never encountered one, because once it chooses you, there's no going back. Story 5. Ghostly warning. It was just past midnight when I felt it. The sudden drop in temperature, the stillness that swallowed every ordinary sound. I was sitting at my desk, staring at my laptop, when a whisper curled around my ear. Not loud, not threatening, but insistent. My heart jumped. "Leave. Before it's too late," the voice said. I spun around. Nothing. Just the shadows dancing on the walls from the flickering lamp. I told myself it was stress, the exhaustion of the week catching up to me. But the voice returned the next night, clearer this time. And I realized it wasn't human. It had a cadence I recognized from somewhere deep in my memory. A tone that was familiar but alien. Like someone I had lost trying to reach me. The words came in fragments, disjointed, but chillingly precise. Red door, third floor, eyes will follow, midnight. I had no idea what it meant. I didn't even know what building the warning referred to. I tried to ignore it to sleep, but the voice found me again, appearing in corners of my vision when I glanced up from my desk. shaping shadows into fleeting figures, whispering variations of the warning. Would you have listened? I muttered to the empty room, heart hammering. The question felt like a challenge, like the ghost knew that ignoring it could come with consequences I didn't want to imagine. By the third night, I was frantic, jotting down every word, every pattern, trying to piece together the meaning. Red door, third floor, eyes, midnight. It made no sense in my apartment, my office, or anywhere I frequented. But the sense of urgency was undeniable. The warning felt alive, crawling under my skin, insisting that danger was not only near, it was imminent. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that it still matters. Maybe the warning applies tonight, or tomorrow, or to someone watching this very video. And that's the terrifying part. I don't know if I'm the only one meant to hear it, or if it's reaching out to anyone who will listen. The voice never gave more than fragments, but its presence lingered. A harbinger of something I couldn't yet name, something that seemed tied to every shadow I'd encountered in the weeks before. And as I lay awake, the rain outside hammering against the window, I realized that this warning was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern, a sequence of events I had no choice but to follow. And that pattern led directly to the next encounter, something far closer to home, something that made every rational explanation crumble. Story 6. Vanishing roommate, friend. It started with a text message that didn't feel right. My roommate, Daniel, usually full of jokes and constant chatter, sent me a single line. "I think someone's watching me. Don't look for me." I laughed nervously at first, thinking it was some twisted prank. But when I returned to the apartment that evening, he wasn't there. His keys were on the counter, his shoes were by the door, and the air felt wrong, heavy, like someone had left in a hurry and taken a part of the world with them. I called him, no answer. Texted, nothing. Panic started to settle in. By morning, I filed a missing person report, and the police came, polite but skeptical. "He's probably just running from something personal," one officer said. "People do it all the time." But I knew Daniel. He didn't just vanish. Something else was at work. Days later, strange coincidences began piling up. Emails from his account appeared, sent to friends, but unsigned. Messages like, "I shouldn't be here, but they won't let me leave." His social media accounts posted updates he never wrote. Photos of empty streets, dark corners of the city, places I'd never seen him visit. Every time I tried to trace him, the trail went cold, like he had slipped between reality and something else entirely. The police didn't understand the pattern, but I did. Or at least I think I do. Some nights, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow from the corner of my eye. In places Daniel used to be, some nights I could swear I heard his voice whispering my name through the walls, faint and pleading. Sometimes they're not gone, just somewhere you can't reach. Friends told me similar stories. Rumors about others disappearing in the neighborhood. People last seen walking home. vanishing into streets that seemed to twist on themselves. The coincidence was too precise to ignore. It was as if some invisible force was sweeping through, claiming those it chose, leaving only echoes behind. I still have his room untouched. Sometimes I leave the door slightly ajar, hoping, hoping that he might return, or that I might see some sign of him. But the fear is always there, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. And the longer he remains missing, the more certain I am that Daniel's disappearance is tied to something older, something whispered about in legends, something that's now coming for me too, because the story doesn't end with him. And the next tale I'm about to tell explains why. Story 7. Near Death, Afterlife. Glimpse. I remember the moment my world stopped. 1 second, I was walking down the narrow trail by the river, the rain slicking the stones beneath my feet. The next, everything went silent, weightless, suspended. There was no pain, no fear at first, just an overwhelming sense of detachment, as if my body were nothing more than a husk. I had been clinically dead for minutes, though I wouldn't have known it without the paramedics' later insistence. Then I saw it. Light, but not the soft, comforting glow people talk about. This light was alive, shifting, stretching into impossible shapes, moving with a will of its own. And within it, I glimpsed faces, not smiling, not angry, but knowing, eyes that bore into me with such intensity that I could feel their gaze long after I returned. Some were familiar, fleeting echoes of people I had lost, others impossible, alien, twisted in ways that made my mind tremble. A voice, or something like a voice, whispered, though my lips never moved, "Do not return." But you will. The words burned into me, imprinting a knowledge I could not name, a sensation that my very essence had been touched by something beyond understanding. Time lost meaning there. I was both nowhere and everywhere. And then, abruptly, I was yanked back, my lungs burning, my body gasping for life in a world I barely recognized. Life after that moment has been altered. Colors are sharper, shadows linger where they shouldn't, and sometimes I catch fleeting glimpses of the same faces in passing crowds. Some glimpses leave permanent marks, invisible scars that tangle with your perception of reality. Every day, I am reminded that the world isn't as it seems, that the veil between life and something else is thinner than anyone dares admit. I can't explain why I came back. I can't explain what followed me. But I know one thing. I carry a fragment of that otherworldly realm inside me. And it watches, waits, reminding me that what I glimpsed is not just myth or hallucination. Something crossed over with me, subtle, patient, and it is always just out of reach, reminding me that death isn't always an ending. It can be a beginning of something far darker. And what happened next is something I wish I could forget. Though I fear the next story will make you understand why forgetting is impossible. Story 8. Poltergeist/home invasion. It started small, just a door creaking when no one was near it, a faint thump in the kitchen late at night. My family and I shrugged it off as the house settling, or perhaps the wind. But soon, the noises became deliberate. Cups rattling in the cupboard, drawers opening on their own, footsteps pacing across the hallway while everyone was asleep. At first, we laughed nervously. "It's just a prank," my younger sister said, trying to sound brave, though I could see the fear in her eyes. But laughter faded fast. Objects began moving with precision, almost as if they had intent. Pictures tilted, lamps toppled, and the cold spots appeared in places that made no sense. Every time I walked into a room, I had the unnerving feeling that I wasn't alone. And sometimes I wasn't. Then it started calling our names. Not in the playful mimicry of a child or a neighbor. No, it was in our voices, but darker, slower, almost mocking. "Adil, Adil." The first time I heard it, I froze. The sound came from the corner of the living room, where the shadows pooled thick and unnatural. My heart thumped in my chest, panic clawing at my throat. My mother ran in, flashlight in hand, only to find empty air and the echo of my name fading into silence. It escalated from there. Slams shook the walls, whispers echoed from the vents. And at night, I would wake to find the furniture rearranged in ways that made no sense. Symbols I didn't recognize, etched into the floorboards. Chairs stacked impossibly. Doors locked from the inside. Even the dog refused to enter certain rooms, growling at the air. Hackles raised, staring at nothing I could see. We tried everything. Holy water, prayers, even bringing in someone who claimed to communicate with spirits. But nothing stopped it. The house had learned us, learned our routines, our fears. And yet, despite all this, I knew we were only a small part of something bigger, something not confined to our walls, something that moved from home to home, feeding, learning, leaving terror in its wake. And this was only one story. The phenomenon didn't stay put. It spread, which brings me to the next story. A tale of a home that wasn't just haunted, but hunted, where fear became a constant companion, and the world outside the walls offered no refuge. Story 9. Stalking Shadow, Urban Legend. It started on a normal afternoon, walking home from work. The streets slick with rain, reflections shimmering under the streetlights. At first, I didn't notice it. A figure in the distance, blurred by the drizzle, waiting at the crosswalk, or standing by the corner cafe. But then, it moved with me, always a step behind. Its outline dark, shifting, impossible to pin down. I laughed nervously to myself. "Get a grip," I muttered, glancing over my shoulder. But the laugh died on my lips. The figure mirrored my movements exactly, perfectly, as if it were a shadow made flesh, waiting for me to notice. Every turn I took, every street I crossed, it appeared again, just beyond my peripheral vision. I asked friends, "Have you seen anyone following me?" They shook their heads, bewildered. But later, I discovered whispers online, reports of a shadow that stalked the unwary through city streets, glimpsed by commuters, joggers, even tourists. Some claimed it was a warning, others said it was something worse, an omen that appeared before tragedies. Every day became a test of perception. Streetlights cast false shapes. Windows reflected a figure where no one stood. I felt eyes on my back constantly, my pulse thrumming with the certainty that this thing was not imaginary, even if no one else could see it. It was patient, silent, learning my habits, feeding on my fear, shaping me into someone always alert, always watching, never comfortable. Is it real? Or am I losing my mind? I whispered into the empty apartment at night, staring at the window. The shadows beyond didn't answer. They only waited. But the more I learned, the more I realized the pattern wasn't limited to me. Others had seen it, and it seemed to follow quietly, leaving doubt and unease in its wake. The city became a maze of potential encounters, each alleyway a question, each reflection a challenge to my sanity. And yet, despite the terror, I knew it was all connected. The shadow, the whispers, the disappearances, the haunted houses, every story, every encounter I had lived pointed toward a culmination I could not yet comprehend. And that culmination is the final story, the one where all the threads come together, where the rain, the shadows, the whispers, and the fear converge into something that refuses to let go. Story 10. The final revelation, forbidden knowledge. Now, you know what I know, or at least pieces of it. Shadows that follow, whispers that linger, reflections that twist reality. All fragments of a larger truth I stumbled upon and wish I could unlearn. Some truths are meant to remain hidden, buried beneath the ordinary. Yet I couldn't stop myself from looking. Curiosity, or perhaps something darker, drew me in, and what I found was not meant for human eyes. It began innocuously, a journal left behind by someone who had disappeared. Scribbled pages filled with fragmented warnings, diagrams, and names that kept recurring. The entry spoke of crossings between worlds, of entities that thrived on observation, fear, and attention. They linked life after death to the doppelgängers, the stalking shadows, and the haunted objects, suggesting an unseen hand guiding them all. Reading it felt like staring into a sun, terrifying, bright, and impossible to look away from. I realized the encounters weren't random. Each story I've told you, every nightmare I've lived, was part of a cycle, a pattern older than memory, repeating in whispers and reflections across time. Those who vanish, those who glimpse the other side, those who hear voices in the dark. They are not victims by accident. They are markers, pieces of a puzzle we are never meant to solve. The final revelation came like a strike of lightning. The mirror, the shadows, the whispers, they were all connected. And worse, some fragment of me, a part I didn't recognize, seemed to have crossed over in the process. Sometimes when I catch my reflection in the rain-slicked streets, I see it, a slight difference in my own expression, a glimmer of something that shouldn't exist, watching me as much as I watch it. I can't explain why it allows me to remain, why I am not taken like the others. But the feeling is constant. The pattern is ongoing, patient, and far from over. Even now, as I speak to you, I sense it lingering, waiting, observing. And though I survive to tell you this, I know that the story doesn't end here. It never ends. So tonight, as the rain falls and shadows stretch longer than they should, ask yourself, are you merely watching these stories? Or have they begun to watch you? Because the truth is out there, just beyond perception. And some part of you already knows what I've learned. That fear, once seen, never truly disappears. I sit here now, the rain falling in relentless sheets outside my window, and I can't shake the feeling that tonight, like every night, the world is watching. Shadows stretch across the room in strange, unnatural ways, whispering in tones that only the most attentive ears can catch. After telling you these 10 stories, I feel the weight of them all pressing on me at once. The vanished friends, the mirrored doubles, the voices in the darkness, the warnings we don't fully understand. Each encounter lingers, unresolved, like a knot I can't untangle, a question without an answer. And that's what horror does, isn't it? It leaves threads dangling, weaving through your mind long after the lights are off. It makes you wonder whether the shadows in your room are ordinary, or if they're part of something older, something patient and observant that waits for the right moment to reach out. The rain outside isn't just water on glass. It's a rhythm, a reminder, a heartbeat connecting the stories, as if every drop carries the echoes of the encounters I've shared. I want you to think about this. The next time you see a reflection in a window, a shadow that moves independently, or hear a whisper in the middle of the night, ask yourself, is it simply coincidence? Or is it part of a larger pattern? Have you noticed small anomalies in your own life? Fleeting moments that felt wrong, yet undeniable. I encourage you to share them, to write them in the comments, to engage. There's power in noticing, in acknowledging the unseen. Stories like these rarely exist in isolation. They ripple outward, connecting, overlapping, warning us that none of us are entirely safe. Some nights I catch myself listening too closely, scanning the dark corners of my room, half expecting the past 10 stories to reach out and manifest again. And perhaps they do, in ways I cannot detect or name. The terror isn't always immediate. It's subtle, creeping into ordinary life, shaping thoughts, bending perception, and sometimes waiting for you to be alone. So, as the rain falls tonight, as the wind bends the trees outside, remember this: horror is patient, fear lingers, shadows persist, whispers carry farther than we imagine. And while these stories are told, the pattern continues, relentless and unseen, brushing against the edges of your reality. When the rain falls again tonight, remember, some stories never end.